Hello, my name's Todd Miranda, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use kerning in WPF XAML animations. So let's begin by creating a new WPF project in Microsoft Visual Studio 2005. We'll create a WPF application project, and we'll name the project. Okay. So you might ask what kerning is in animation. So let me try to explain that just a little bit, and then we'll actually look at an example. Kerning allows you to tweak the starting and the beginning part of an animation such that there's a more gradual progression into the animation as opposed to going from 0 to 60 in 0 seconds effectively. So instead of starting an animation and bam, as soon as the animation starts, you've got a constant speed you go from 0, you pretty much go straight up to your speed, you stay at that speed, blah, 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 all the way through the animation, and then bam, drop back off to 0. Alright? Instead of that, kerning allows you to round over the edges of that curve so that instead of going straight from 0 to full speed, you kind of gradually go from 0 to full speed, and how that curve looks and the way that you go from 0 to full speed is up to you, and that's up to the properties that you set when you set the kerning properties, which are the acceleration ratio and the deceleration ratio of a timeline in WPF animations. So let's begin, and let's just go ahead and start working through creating an example that we can then animate and then show some kerning in. Alright, so we'll just go with our grid that we get by default when we create a new window in XAML in Studio, and I'm just going to give us more code room and less design room because we don't really need a designer. We'll just do this in code view. So let's begin by creating an ellipse, and we'll specify this width. Ellipse has a width of maybe 75 and a height of about the same. So we'll have a round ellipse. So we'll have, maybe it looks like a ball, and we'll specify a margin of 0 because we're going to put this thing horizontally. Oops, not right. We want it to the left, and vertically we want it on the top. All right. Now, in our ellipse, we will have, let's say we've got a render transform for our ellipse. This is what we will use to actually animate, because you know in WPF when you're working with animations, you're effectively animating or changing the value of an element over time, and that's being done to a property. So you're affecting the value of a property over time. That's what animation really is in WPF. So we need a property that we can modify over time, and you really don't want to affect the margin. You could change the margin of an ellipse over time, but most of the time what you want to do is we'll use a transform, a scale transform or a translate transform. In this case we're going to use a translate transform, and then you modify the values for that transform, and that's how you affect the element. So we'll do an ellipse dot render transform, and then we'll do a translate transform here, and we'll say translate transform, we'll say x equals 0, because initially we don't want it to, whoops, we want x equals 0, not little x, and we want y equals 0. Alright, so there's our translate transform. So initially we're going to translate this element 0 pixels in the x direction, 0 pixels in the y direction, and that's fine because we don't want to change the transform until we actually begin the animation. Alright, so okay, so how do we do the animation? How are we going to start that? Well, we want this ellipse, and I'll tell you what, we need to color it so we can see it. So why don't we do a fill of, maybe we could do green? Yeah, green will work. Okay, so we want to trigger the animation to happen maybe when someone clicks on it. It's an easy thing to do for a demo, is just to trigger an animation to occur, or trigger, in this case, a storyboard to begin when a event is triggered. In this case, a mouse left button down. So let's start by setting the ellipse dot triggers, and we'll use our IntelliSense here to get down to triggers. Probably would have been faster to just type it, but that's okay. And then we'll do an event trigger in this case, and we're gonna the routed event. Remember that we're using routed events in WPF. The routed event that we want to respond to is the mouse left button down event. So there's our event trigger. All right, now the event trigger has actions that we can work with. So we'll do actions. Now, the reason that we have to go through this whole trigger scenario with animations is that the action requires an event, a type of action to occur, and we can't go directly to the animation. Like you couldn't put a double animation in an action because it's not the right type. So we actually need to use a storyboard in our actions. So we'll do our begin storyboard, and this is the action that we want to take. We want to do a begin storyboard. And what storyboard do we want to begin? Well, we want to begin this particular storyboard, and the target property of our storyboard equals something. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about target property. If you haven't done animations much in WPF, then this may seem it just takes a little getting used to. The target property is actually a property path. Alright, so it allows you to delve down to a property. So that means that you can access a property through its fully qualified property path, that is. Alright, and the way we do that in this particular case is something like this. We say we want the ellipse.render transform. Alright, so we want that property, and then we want its dot translate transform, and we want the dot x part of that. Okay, so there's our target property for this particular storyboard. We're going to do the render transform in the ellipse, and within the render transform, we're going to do the translate, the x of the translate transform, the x property of the translate transform. Okay, so now inside our storyboard, since we're going to be affecting the x and y, the number of pixels, which is a double value, we actually want to do a double animation. So we'll specify double animation, and we'll do a duration for now. Let's say 0 hours, 0 minutes. We definitely want this to be a little faster than that, and we'll do 3 seconds. So to start off with, that'll give us something good to start with. Now, we want the value to go to, let's say 200. Since our width and height of our window is 300, we'll go to 200. So the x value will go from what it is now to 200. And we want that to happen over the period of time of 3 seconds. Now we could also put in here auto reverse. We won't worry about that though for now. So we'll leave it at that. There's our double animation. However, that's only the x property. We'd really actually like to do the y property as well. So I'm going to copy this begin storyboard. We can have multiple actions within the event trigger.actions collection. And translate form.y. And for now, we'll say the y is going to go to 200 as well. So this will give us a 45 degree, this ball will move along a 45 degree angle. And it'll move 45 degrees because we're going to the same distance, 200 and 200, and both in 3 seconds. All right. So that gives us our other storyboard. And that looks like about all we need to get started with just a simple animation. So let's take a look at this. Let's build this. Build succeeded, and let's run it. My bad. It doesn't understand mouse left button down, because what is mouse left button down? What we really actually want is the ellipse dot mouse left button down. Alright, so that's a little bit better. It should be able to find that event now. Let's run this. And that's a little better. Alright, so now when we click on our ellipse, we get an animation that goes effectively from one corner to the other. Alright, so you see how, that was okay. That was animation. Sure, we were able to move that thing from one place to another, but if we really wanted that to look like a ball, that didn't look very realistic. So we need to add some reality to that. And the way we do that is kerning. Alright, and the kerning is affected by two properties that we're going to deal with: the acceleration ratio and the deceleration ratio. Okay, so what is the acceleration ratio? The acceleration ratio is the percentage of the time it takes to travel along the path that this item is going to accelerate from speed 0 to its maximum speed. Alright, so it's the amount of time it takes. Effectively, it's the amount of time it takes, but it's the percentage of travel across the path being taken up but as the object goes from speed 0 to maximum speed. So, for instance, let's say we're going to put 0.2 here, and it goes from 0 to 1, where 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%. So we're going to do 0.2. Alright, so that gives us a 20%. It's going to go 20% along the way of that path before it reaches maximum speed. Alright, and we're going to do the same thing down here with the acceleration ratio in the y direction, 0.2. Alright, so let's take a look at this. Alright, we're going to click the button. Alright, now, I don't know if you saw how it kind of started off a little more slowly there. Let's run that again and we'll see. Watch how it starts off slowly and then speeds up to that constant speed. All right, see how you got a little bit of an acceleration there. Let's increase the acceleration ratio to 50%. And we could go higher, but we'll go to 50%. That way you can see it a little better. All right. All right, so notice how very definitely there you could see how it sped up out of that corner. All right, so now let's look at the deceleration ratio, and this is obviously the exact opposite of what we talked about. Now here we could do 0.5, and we'll do 0.5 in the y direction as well. So what this means is half of the time that it's traveling, it's going to be accelerating. The other half of the time, it's going to be decelerating. All right. So hopefully now when I click on the ellipse, it'll be maybe a little jerky, but you can see that we get some definite acceleration and some definite deceleration across the path of the animation. There's some definite acceleration and some definite deceleration that you see there. All right, so we were able to really give that animation a much more natural appearance by setting our kerning values. Setting the kerning values, though, can give you more than just a natural appearance to your animation. It can actually give you the capability to be a little more creative in the path that the animation takes. Now, we've set the 2 value for both x and y direction to the same value. That means that we really should get a 45-degree movement in our ellipse. So we're going the same direction in the x as we are in the y. Should be about 45 degrees. However, let's cut the acceleration and the deceleration down to 0 on y. This is the same as not having them, but as opposed to removing the properties, we'll just set the properties to 0. All right, so now we have acceleration in the x direction, no acceleration in the y direction, which means y will be a constant speed across the animation. Let's see what happens to the path of the animation when we do that. We'll try this again. And watch the path. Normally it's been moving in a direct 45-degree line here. Watch the path of the animation when I click. Notice how we get this down and then across and then down again. Almost a little bit more like a Bezier curve or Bezier path here. And we didn't modify the translation. We're still translating from its current position to 200 in both directions, but we've modified the speed at which it translates to the X and the Y differently so that it moves along one axes at a different speed than the other axes, and that allows us to actually modify the path of the animation. So hopefully you can see that kerning is easy to use. It makes your animations a little bit more natural in appearance, and with a little bit of creativity, it actually can give you the capability to modify your animation path just slightly and add some of these animation movements along the path with nothing more than setting a couple properties in the kerning. So hopefully you've picked up something on kerning and can use that in your own animations pretty soon.
Thank you.